Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. I'm thrilled for today's guest and the discussion we're going to have about the power of mattering. Our guest today is Zach Mercurio, who is an author, researcher, and leadership development facilitator, specializing in purposeful leadership, mattering, and meaningful work. Zach holds a Ph.D. in organizational learning, performance, and change, and advises leaders in organizations worldwide on practices for building cultures that promote well being, motivation, and performance. He's published two books. The most recent is The Power of Mattering: How Leaders Can Create a Culture of Significance. And previously, The Invisible Leaders: Transform Your Life, Work, and Organization with the Power of Authentic Purpose, and has been featured in the Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Psychology Today, the Denver Post, and on ABC News. So we are thrilled to have you, Zach, on the Unscripted podcast. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Wonderful. So let's start with a distinction between belonging and mattering. Can you talk about how those things are different and why mattering matters so much?
Sure. I'll add another one in there too, which is inclusion,
Mm-hmm.
which has gotten a lot of press in the past decade. I'll give a sports team example to help us, right? Mattering, well, let's start with belonging. Belonging is being picked for the team.
Mm-hmm.
Belonging is feeling welcomed, accepted, and connected in a group. Inclusion is being able and invited to play in the game. But mattering is feeling that the team wouldn't be complete without you.
Mm-hmm.
Mattering is feeling significant to the individuals on the team, that your presence and absence means something. I can feel that I belong in this podcast conversation. I feel part of it. I feel welcomed, connected by you. I can feel included. I'm able to take an equitable role in the conversation. But I could have, maybe you don't notice that I'm a caretaker for a parent, or that you're unable to name like a unique gift that I offer relative to other people, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm not shown the difference that I make and how I uniquely make it, right? So we can feel that we belong, we can feel that we're included, and we can feel insignificant to
Mm-hmm.
individuals. Why this is important is because mattering happens at the interpersonal level. You can't program your way out of it. There's no initiative or perk that can show someone how they matter. Only people can show people how they matter.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why it's critical for organizations wanting to do anything and in life is that mattering is first and foremost a survival instinct. It is our most primal survival instinct. No one would be here listening to this podcast if at some point we hadn't mattered enough to another person so that person would keep us alive.
Mm-hmm.
So to be important to another person is a survival instinct. And that instinct turns into the fundamental need to feel seen, heard, valued, and needed by those around us. Doesn't go away, just like the instinct to eat or sleep doesn't go away. That's why when people say to me, Zach, this is kind of like the soft stuff or touchy-feely stuff, I always say it's about as touchy-feely as feeding someone who's hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And when we experience that, so when the need and the instinct to matter is met, we experience what psychologists call mattering, which is the belief that we're significant to those around us. And just as mattering comes first as people, it's like our first instinct. We actually search to matter physically when we're born before we search for food. It comes before pretty much everything else we say we want in work, for example. Like if you want someone to contribute, they first have to believe they're worthy of contributing.
Mm-hmm.
If you want someone to share their voice, they first have to believe their voice is significant. If you want someone to use their strengths, they first have to believe that they have them.
Mm-hmm.
If you want something to matter to someone, they first have to believe that they matter. If you want someone to care, they first have to feel cared for. So it's really the prerequisite to motivation, performance, productivity, because a lot of times we've thought that people needed to add value to be valued,
Mm-hmm.
but psychologically, biologically, it's the opposite. People need to feel value to add value.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. I took a note on one question I need to add to our list that I'm going to come back to. And I'm going to see if I can start by staying with our outline a little bit, but no promises. Okay. You and I were talking before we started recording about this shift that is taking place in the workplace and in leadership. You had a recent LinkedIn post that describes this really well. It says, despite what's on display today, command and control leadership doesn't work. A review of 43 studies from 1966 to 2021 revealed that authoritarian leadership styles are associated with reduced motivation, stifled creativity and innovation, lower job and task performance, higher turnover rates, and more dysfunctional team climates. A key contributor to these outcomes is the erosion of both interpersonal and organizational trust, resulting from a lack of care and psychological safety. True, sustained loyalty and performance emerge when leaders build trust, demonstrate care, and cultivate a sense of safety, not incite fear. So, we were chatting about essentially this shift, right? You described this really well. This old, I always say old school leadership style, and I have to clarify that I don't mean old in an age context. I just mean, outdated way of thinking. This authoritarian style is no longer effective for the dynamics that we see in the workplace today, and more importantly, as we look ahead to what's coming in the next 3, 5, 10 years. So what else would you say about this shift, and why are these concepts about purposeful leadership and meaningful work not fluffy given what you just described in this post?
I would argue that it's never really worked. What it has done is it incites short-term financial gain or shareholder value. It doesn't work. If you look at the fallout of organizations that have had tyrannical leaders, there's usually a cycle of 2 or 3 years of increased shareholder value and then a massive rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
Increased shareholder value, a massive rebuild. You'll see this.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work in the long term. Fear incites short-term bursts of energy. And what fear requires is requires you to be regularly cruel to keep the fear alive.
Mm-hmm.
Layoffs via Zoom, threats, email us every week with your status report on what you accomplished. Those are actually measured acts of cruelty that keep the fear alive. It is and it doesn't work to motivate people. And one of the reasons why is think of the last time you've been energized, in flow, creative, innovative, while simultaneously you're in a survival state of fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're fundamentally at odds.
They're fundamentally at odds.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't work for many of the outcomes we say we want. The research is very clear on that. But one of the reasons why we're coming back to this style of leadership is we find that authoritarian leadership styles actually correlate. The rise of those styles correlate with complexity.
Mm-hmm.
So when something's complex or uncertain, we seek to control it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you see the political variables going on right now, the societal variables, the technological uncertainty with regard to artificial intelligence, hybrid work arrangements. And so when a leader can't get a grasp on something, they usually revert to control
Mm-hmm.
through fear. I would also argue that leaders control what they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find is leaders who can't connect with people, they can't do the hard work to develop care and safety, or they don't know how to, or they don't want to take the time to. They usually try to control when they can't connect.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders who can't connect typically control. Um, and and as we look at the future of leadership and the future of work, people are simply going to have more choices of where, when, and how to earn a living.
Mm-hmm.
One, I mean, there's access to gig work. There is more educational attainment and literacy rates around the world, which means that more people have more choice. When people have more choice, they have more discernment. People usually discern how they want to spend their time based on how they feel. So that's going to exponentially increase. The other thing that's going on is artificial intelligence, yes, can do our tasks. It can't take moral responsibility for them. Artificial intelligence can do things for you. It can't care for you. More
Mm-hmm.
people than ever are realizing that. And I think the most the most in-demand commodity is going to be human trust. And I also think this is why the World Economic Forum, in their 2030 top most in-demand skills for the future of work, for the first time, 5 out of 10 of them were non-technical skills. And do you know what they were? They were curiosity, understanding, active listening, compassion. And why is that? You cannot have trust without human care.
Mm-hmm.
And if you cannot cultivate caring and trusting relationships, I mean, I believe that in the next 50 years, you'll have a non-viable organization when it comes to a sustainable labor force and sustainable output.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking, when you were describing what you said is, these authoritarian styles have never actually worked. What they've done is force compliance, right? But
Mm,
we're now in a landscape where people are just not as willing to comply, right? They want more, they will demand more. Um, I think you saw me kind of start to say something and I stopped myself, which I was thinking about, you're talking about control, right? So these styles coming from a sense of needing to control, needing to control outcomes, needing to control the feeling in the room, needing to control, optics, etc., right? Um, but I I feel like control is only ever perceived, right? Like we don't really ever have control. So, I mean, all that you're really achieving is a perception of control. Or really like you pointed out, if you look at this cyclically, a short-term perception of having achieved control. But in reality, it's not sustainable, right? And
right.
that's what you were saying about, this cycle. And so you see it repeat because you know, that myth of control can't be sustained. So then you have to rebuild so that someone else can come in and create another, perceived state of controlling things that ultimately, you can't really control.
I
It's
mean, yeah, why is the average tenure of a CEO 5 to 7 years?
mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And and I think that again, and we do this at smaller levels as well. Yeah, you can't. So you're looking for perceived control to make it feel like you're in control. You also it helps to make the another person the other.
Hmm.
So it helps to dehumanize. It's
Hmm.
much easier to get short-term like financial results when you dehumanize somebody,
Sure.
when you don't see and hear them. Like that's the shortcut, right? Is that a lot of these things like, oh, people just work for a paycheck, this idea of work as exchange, I have the power, I have the money. You come and do this thing. I'll give you a little bit of this some money to go home and be happy, be content
Hmm.
with what you have. That style work as exchange that is going away,
Hmm.
right? I mean, so you can't just pay people more to suffer more.
Hmm.
Right. We've had too many in the last few years what some philosophers call death nudges or mortality awareness at a grand scale to expect people to spend their incredibly rare existence suffering for your ends.
Hmm.
The moment you see someone as a means to an end is the moment you stop seeing them as human. And people feel that.
Hmm. Yeah.
And like I said, people do not add value if they don't feel valued
Yeah.
sustainably. So it's a short finite game that people are playing when they use fear, and I think
Hmm.
they know that actually.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, so what I want to go back to is, you said this earlier. You can't expect something to matter to someone who doesn't feel that they matter. People engage when they know their involvement is valued. People care when they feel cared for. Relationships precede results. So I agree with this 100%. And more, you have leaders saying, we want someone who has a sense of ownership. We want
Mhm.
we want to empower our employees, right? But I don't know that they're always or even often doing the things they need to do that we're going to talk about next, to create this sense of mattering, right? So, what
Mhm.
is it that keeps leaders stuck between wanting the outcome, but not doing the things we're going to talk about to, not getting that the chicken and the egg, right? Like if you want these things, what you actually need to do is, invest in your people in these ways.
I want to run a marathon, but it's really friggin' hard to get up at 4 in the morning and run 4 miles 3 times a week, 4 times
Mm-hmm.
a week, right? I want you want all of these financial security, but it's really hard to be like maintain a budget every month.
Mm-hmm.
Like we want all these lagging indicators. We want the
Mm-hmm.
effects. This is human nature, but it always takes consistent disciplined work to invest in the leading indicator. And all of the self-help gurus out there, they always tell you about this focus on the process, focus on the process, focus on your discipline. The same is true with our relationships with one another.
Mm-hmm.
The same is true with our relationships at work. I think we don't approach developing meaningful, high quality relationships through our interactions with as much rigor as we approach the outcomes. One
Mm-hmm.
of the reasons why is we've called these things soft for 50 years.
Yeah.
Anytime you see something as soft or simple, you're susceptible to an overconfidence bias. You
Mm-hmm.
think you're better at it than you are. It's why, like when physicians, for example, and I just read this a study, when physicians are asked to estimate how long they talk, how long their patients talk before they interrupt them, on average, physicians say it's about 7 or 8 minutes. When their patients are asked, it's about 48 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is emblematic of what we see across the landscape of human interactions. We think we're better at these things than we are. But there's a couple of other things going on I think is very important. One is that we're just getting worse at these skills. There's a concept right now called social skill decay. So when we don't use a skill, it decays in about 4 days of not using it. Now, we now have been using Slack, our smartphones, platforms, kudos platforms, messaging platforms to communicate with each other in short transactions. So, like, if you give me some bad news about something, I can just say, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." Give you a sad faced emoji. I've done my moral duty. But what we don't understand is every time I do that, I get out of the social situation, which I call social repetition. I get out of taking that social rep of showing care, demonstrating understanding, being uncomfortable. Every time we haven't done that in the last 25 years since we sent our first text message,
Mm-hmm.
we are actually losing the skill. And so we've collectively lost these skills to care, and we need to more rigorously pursue them. And then the final piece that's getting in the way is our attention has been fracked more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
There are more things competing for our attention. Our attention span right now, when we were focusing on the person in front of us, about 10 years ago, researchers found it was about 2.5 minutes before you got distracted by another thought while you were talking with somebody. Well, they replicated those studies a couple of years ago, and it's about 40 seconds now.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things make social skills and the skills to show people that they're seen, heard, valued, and needed more important than ever. But we're actually facing more barriers than ever.
Mm-hmm.
We're in environments that take our attention away from doing it. And so this is why I believe there needs to be a massive reskilling on what it means to be a person.
Yeah. Yeah. Like human boot camp.
Well, like human boot camp, or just simply with as much rigor as we approach any financial product development
Yeah.
strategy, manufacturing strategy, we should be pursuing evaluating, developing the skills and practices to ensure that people themselves feel that they matter. We have
Yeah.
practices and processes for everything else that matters in organizations, usually except ensuring the people themselves feel that they matter.
Yeah. Which often, very often, is the root of why those outcomes aren't achieved.
Yeah.
If
And
you think about, like, I
yes,
know part of
absolutely.
your doctorate is in change, right? Like, change
Uh-huh.
management, change leadership is something we talk about all the time. And I always say, like, I've been doing this work for, I don't know, 18 years, right? And all 18 years, it's always the number one thing people say they didn't do well, they didn't invest enough in. cause them to not attain the outcome. But nobody ever changes what they're doing about it. I mean, it doesn't really, you know, move up the priority list because, again, the perception or that idea of what it would actually take to do it
Yes.
differently, right?
Yeah, it's quote unquote inefficient,
Hmm.
right? But there's nothing more, I mean, you've seen this probably in your change work. There's nothing more inefficient in the long term than people feeling misunderstood,
Right. Trying
unheard,
to force people
unseen in
to
the
do
process.
something that they don't
Yeah,
understand or they don't feel part of, and then wondering why they're not
right.
complying.
And
Yeah.
I think that too many people like focus on change management and not change leadership, right?
Hmm.
Change management, you can manage all of the processes, procedures.
Yeah.
I mean, all the fancy models, go get certified in this model. Change leadership is making sure that people feel that they matter
Yeah. It's
in the
this
change.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. You also had a brilliant description earlier. You mentioned that people are pursuing compliance. And I think this is very important because
Hmm.
there's a difference between compliance and commitment.
Hmm.
A lot of leaders misunderstand. Compliance is when someone does something because you want them to do it. Commitment is when someone does something because they want to do it.
Right.
And that intrinsic motivation, I mean, the number one predictor of intrinsic motivation is purpose. I know why it's happening.
Hmm.
Purpose, autonomy, I have some control over what's going on. Right? Right? Mastery, I'm competent in what I'm doing, and being able to see the meaning of it.
Hmm. Yeah. And often it's companies are only focusing on the mastery. Like, well,
Right.
we've
Oh yeah,
given them
here's what, yep.
training,
Here's the
they have
tools.
the skills, right? And ignoring those other three components. Yet they want that sense of ownership that can only come through commitment, that can only be attained when someone feels that they matter and, they see how that's the case. So let's talk about what it takes to create mattering. So there's a very simple framework. And I'm hoping you can walk us through these different steps: noticing, affirming, and needing, and share, a couple of examples, or let us know what we need to know about each of these steps.
Sure. I think that one thing I want to go back on is if you're listening and you're skeptical about this, or you're like, well, we need to produce these results. You can think about this question. What financial metric is not mediated through a human being, right? You can't name one. And then if you ask yourself, like, what's the ideal state of that human being that's producing that? And you'll probably say they should be motivated, they should care about what they're doing, they should be able to see the difference that what they're doing is making, how it's necessary for the bigger strategy. In other words, they should see how they matter,
Hmm.
right? So even when we think about when we're most motivated, when we're performing the best, it usually comes down to at some level we see how we or what we're doing matters.
Hmm.
And I think that once organizations can just realize this truth of human existence and human psychology and invest in it, there'll be a lot less anxiety over trying to control the outcomes through compliance because you're building the sustainable energy needed to produce those things.
Hmm.
Now, one of the ways to do that is to approach this skillfully. Like these are skills. We've asked thousands of people when you feel that you matter at work and to a leader, what is happening around you? And there are three major experiences people were having when they felt that they mattered.
Hmm.
One is that they felt noticed. So we talked about this. They felt seen and heard. So someone actually remembered and checked in on the details of their life and of their work. Their voice was heard. The meaning behind their words, the feelings behind their words were addressed. And they constantly had somebody that was checking in and not waiting for something to go wrong to hear from them.
Hmm.
For example, one of the things I ask people is if you called your direct report out of the blue today, what would their first reaction be? I was doing a workshop last week and a woman blurted out terror,
Hmm.
right? If you think it's fear and anxiety, it's not that you're a bad leader. It's that too many of your interactions have been transactional.
Hmm.
So when you are reaching out to somebody, you're asking them for something, not asking what you can do for them
Hmm.
or asking how they're doing. So That is a noticing problem. The second, and we can get into each of these later if we want. The second is the skills to affirm a person. So we have appreciation and recognition programs. I think I'm writing an article now on why these haven't worked. So the recognition platform market
Mm-hmm.
is now a $19 billion market. It's projected to be a $50 billion market in 2030. We have more employee appreciation weeks. We have peer kudos platforms, values-based awards, ceremonies to show people how they're contributing to the purpose. And yet people are more undervalued, unseen, feel more overlooked than ever, according to recent surveys. And one of the reasons why is appreciation and recognition is different than the interpersonal experience of being affirmed by another person. So, like, appreciation is general gratitude for who someone is, their presence, their role. Recognition is showing gratitude for what someone does, celebrating the wins, right? But affirmation is showing somebody how their specific, unique gifts make a specific, unique impact. So it's being able to name the unique strengths someone offers, the unique perspective and wisdom someone offers relative to others, and show them exactly how what they're doing and their inputs are needed for some bigger whole. And that's the last area is making sure people feel needed.
Mm-hmm.
Because when people feel replaceable, they'll act that way. And that's why this whole management trope of don't forget you're replaceable at work doesn't work because it's
Mm-hmm.
antithetical to everything we say we want. There was a French agricultural engineer. His name was Max Ringelmann. He did my favorite experiment. He had individuals pull on a rope as hard as they could, and he attached it to a dynamometer, this little device that measures force, and he measured their total force readings for the individuals. And then he put them into groups and had them pull on the rope as hard as they could, attach the same device to the rope, and added up all the force readings for the groups. And he wanted to know, did the individuals exert more force or did the groups? And it was the individuals every time.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is because the individuals knew that their effort was indispensable.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people feel replaceable, they'll act that way. When they feel irreplaceable, they'll act that way. And one of the best ways to do this is to make sure people can see exactly how they and their unique perspectives, strengths, purpose, impact is needed. Saying things like, if it wasn't for you, and making sure
Mm-hmm.
people can see and walk the ladder all the way up to how they and their inputs are indispensables to something bigger.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about something related to noticing. Okay, so noticing, you're talking about seeing and hearing others. Okay, so part of that is the hearing piece related to being able to ask questions. And you had this post about asking bad questions that I loved. And it said, the quality of our questions determines the quality of our interactions. Yet, too often, we ask bad questions that don't help us understand another person's experience. And it is impossible to care for someone you don't understand. Bad questions are vague, closed, and evaluative. Good questions are clear, open, and exploratory. Clear questions are specific. Open questions allow another person to share their experience freely beyond a yes or no. Exploratory questions shift the power to the respondent and remove our judgment. So I feel like this is really important. I'm trying to think now. I don't remember the specific podcast, but this happened within the last few months. I was interviewing someone about leadership and the way that they phrased a question that they were giving an example on to a direct report was a closed question. And I said, well, actually, if you asked it this way, wouldn't it be more impactful? I think for me, having a background in journalism is I'm like
Mm,
trained to be better at asking open-ended questions. It's a very simple thing though that if you pay attention to it, it can unlock, a world of possibility of just understanding people better, ideas, all of these things. Um, so I think it's really interesting. And is there anything else, related to that point or others that you can share on noticing that are like
yeah.
these shifts that can really help leaders be more impactful?
Yeah, I mean, there's three major behaviors that leaders who are good noticers tend to enact. One is they observe. They have some process of observing, of gathering the data to see people, because you can't really notice somebody if you don't have any unique information about them to notice.
Hmm.
So that's where asking questions are so important. And I love how you said that you were trained as a journalist to ask
Hmm.
questions, right? Because your job was to understand people and the stories that they were telling you. That's akin to what a leader's job is. I mean, a
Hmm.
leader's job is people. I mean, you can't care for something you don't understand. And understanding takes time and good questions. And we leave a lot on the table. Like I observe a lot of meetings that start with, "How's everybody doing? Good?"
Hmm.
Can you imagine if you weren't good in that meeting? Would you be like, "Not me," right? Or,
Hmm.
"I hope everybody's doing well today." I'll see like even my kid's principal sends an email out to everybody at the beginning of the school year to all the teachers. "I hope you're doing well." Well, no, these people just raced to get a building going. They have classrooms of kids that are over capacity, under resourced. So the last thing is they need is their hope. What they need is to recognize. I know this is a very difficult time. If you have questions on how to navigate this, please contact us. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing, right?
Hmm.
If you read that, it's all of a sudden like, oh, someone sees me,
Hmm.
right? So it's creating those spaces. But I would also say that they tend to note down what they hear in those questions. And then the third piece is they share back what they remembered. So asking the questions is great, but then noting down what you hear, having it somewhere, and then sharing back is important. We worked with a distribution center, and this is one of my favorite examples. And this whole distribution center, they were struggling with engagement, and they asked me to come in and fix it, right, or understand it. And I always look for outliers because there's always an outlier. There's always a team. There's always a leader that is doing better than the rest. And we found this team that had a very high engagement rates. And we went to this team and said, "What's going on here?" They all said, "It's our supervisor. She just gets us. We do anything for her." So I went to her and I said, "What do you do here?" And she said, "It's really, really simple." She goes, "I have this process where I write down each of my team members' names. I write down one thing I heard them that I wanted to remember about them that week every Friday, whether it was a piece of equipment they were working on that broke that I needed to get fixed, whether it was a meeting they were nervous about, whether their kid was starting baseball this weekend. I write it down. And then on Monday, I just glance at the notebook and I schedule in my phone a 3 minute check in with each of them. And I say, "Hey, last week we were supposed to get that piece of equipment fixed for you. Did we get it fixed?" And she said that every time that someone feels remembered, she just sees them totally relax.
Hmm.
But what I love about it is she didn't leave it up to chance, right? We've come to joke. We call this her noticing notebook. But this is what we find is that leaders don't leave it up to chance. I mean, she wrote these things down. She scheduled the check-in.
Hmm.
So observing, noting, and sharing back what you learn. And I remember she said to me, "Zach, one of the number one things I've learned about leadership is that there's magic in remembering people."
Yeah.
And so the skill to ask good questions, the skill to practice those questions, to see what works, to see what doesn't work, to adjust accordingly, the skill to note down what you hear, the skill to be able to block off the time to share back what you notice. Um, those are practices and they're skills that the best leaders that I've seen don't leave it up to chance.
Hmm.
They rigorously pursue it.
Yeah. Yeah, because, when you asked her, she said, "Well, here's what I do. It's simple." Right? And this is the thing that always gets me about interviewing so many leaders is so often what's being missed or not prioritized or valued enough, it is simple, right? It's just simple doesn't mean easy, right? It's like it's simple, but it requires effort.
Yeah, this is good. I mean, it's simple, but it's skillful.
Hmm.
So it's simple, but
And
it requires
intentional,
skill and intentional.
right?
I'll give you another simple example because, one of my favorite things about my work is that I get to all of the practices that I connect back to research, I've seen an actual leader do. So like I didn't come up with like go make a noticing notebook. I mean, this was something that someone was doing. I think leaders in real situations can be incredibly innovative if their goal is to ensure that people feel valued.
Mm-hmm.
So for the affirmed piece, for example, I got to work at this National Park Service maintenance supervisor. He supervises a maintenance team in a park in the Western United States, inhospitable environment, really low morale, high turnover. It's very hard to get people to do the sort of the dirty work of maintaining a national park, the bathrooms, the bridges, all of that. And he had like numbers of applications, high morale at this park in the middle of Utah. And I went and the Park Service asked me to go see what was going on. And it was ridiculously simple. He would go around during the week and he would take photos on his phone of bridges that were being repaired, of and visitors walking over it. He took a picture of a bathroom that had a shorter line because the bathroom next to it was fixed. There was an issue with it. He took a picture of this family using this new trail that was recently open, and told me that it's for his Friday email. And the only thing in the email he sends to his staff, the subject line is "Look what you did," and then he just attaches like 10 pictures.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. He doesn't. There's no body of the email. It's just "Look what you did." And he said, "My people can't argue whether they or their work matters because I give them photographic evidence." But that practice, right,
Mm-hmm.
of showing people exactly the evidence of how they're making a difference, and this gets to the affirmation practice, and actually doing it and doing it consistently and knowing why you're doing it. I just love that practice of
Mm-hmm.
collecting and telling stories, real evidence of people's significance and feeding it back to them, not telling them that they matter, not saying thank you at 1 o'clock every day, not
Mm-hmm.
giving an email being like, thanks for all your hard work this quarter. It really made a difference. I mean, the consistent practice of showing people the indisputable evidence that they and what they're doing makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
That's a skill.
Yeah. I was thinking, when you were describing affirming the first go round, like it, you know, we're always looking for what's the process, what's the program, what's the, tool we can use to make this easier, right? But there's no shortcut. It needs to be personal. And there's
Hmm.
no shortcut for that, right? Like there could be a system like his system of snapping these pictures, and that is again, it's pretty simple. It's not very time consuming, right? But it shows that he's present, he's noticing what they're doing, and he's, taking the time to take those pictures and share them back and make it personal for them. Um, so yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I think that for the last 20 years, we've tried to tackle this employee engagement problem, this question, through
Mhm.
programs and initiatives. But yet, right, employee engagement is at the lowest it's been in 10 years. That's despite the employee engagement services industry being a $1 billion market. That's despite 100 validated assessments to measure engagement, despite countless well-being programs, DEI programs, perks, wage increases of 42% in 8 years.
Mhm.
Nothing's moved the needle. And, there's one data point that's really important in that latest Gallup survey was that with amongst 15,000 people, just 39% of them could strongly agree that someone at work cared for them as a person.
Mhm.
Just 30% could strongly agree that someone invested in their unique potential. So we can only solve this at the interactional level,
Mhm.
which is very scary and exciting because it's scary because it means that all of your leaders have to show up in their daily interactions and make sure people feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. And they need the skills to do that.
Mhm.
It's scary, but it's hopeful because nobody can take away the power that you have to show up in your next interaction and do
Mhm.
this. There's no red
Yeah.
tape to caring. You don't need your organization's permission or your board permission or your shareholders' permission to show up in your next interaction and show someone they're cared for. So it's
Mhm.
completely accessible. It's completely in the control of everybody.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I want to talk about quote difficult employees, right? So you had a post that I noticed that is talking about how acting out is often not a sign of disobedience, but disconnection. And so I just want to, we've talked so far about how these skills apply sort of, universally to moving from these transactions to relationships to really thinking about, these personal moments and how much they matter in making someone feel that they matter. Um, and I wanted to talk about this because I think it can be so easy for leaders to dismiss these difficult people and in doing so push them further away. So can you talk a little bit about, you know, what these behaviors can mean and how to maybe look at them through a bit of a different lens?
Yeah, all human behavior is the result of either met needs or unmet needs. So if someone's behaving, if someone's like motivated, exhibiting positive behaviors, you should ask yourself as a leader, okay, what needs are being met that's resulting in this positive behavior? If someone's acting in ways that are detrimental or acting out, we should be asking what needs are not being met that's resulting in this behavior psychologically. And that reframe is incredibly powerful because it takes away from this is a difficult person to this is a human being, a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, a partner, a friend, a community member who's behaving in ways that I perceive as difficult. And I may be part of the problem. I may be complicit. My environment may be complicit in the unmet needs that are driving this behavior. And what this does is it helps you seek understanding before you seek to evaluate. And I have seen this is what really the best leaders do is they seek to understand relentlessly before they seek to evaluate and labeling is an easy way out. And we
Mm-hmm.
have them in organizations all the time. Difficult employee, toxic employee, high performer, low performer. Sadly, the moment you label a person is the moment your brain stops devoting energy to understanding them. It categorizes. That's what categorization does. It's why when we go to the grocery store, having the grocery store categorized, it reduces our cognitive energy to think
Mm-hmm.
about where we go. So that's why we just like you go into the grocery store, you know where the produce is because it's labeled produce, you know it's always been there. You can just like mindlessly, like you're a drone, go to the produce area. Well, when we label people, that's what we do. We mindlessly and automatically show up with laziness, intellectual laziness about who they are. The reason why this is important is when people don't feel that they matter, there's two behaviors that result. They either withdraw, isolating, silencing, withholding, or they act out in desperation,
Mm-hmm.
complaining, blaming, gossiping. Um, Human psychology is still human psychology at work. And we know that most acting out from childhood to adulthood is reaching out. Uh, Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist, said that an abnormal human reaction to an abnormal situation is normal human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It is abnormal for a human being to feel insignificant, to feel talked over, to feel that they don't matter, to feel insignificant, to feel that their inputs aren't valued, to feel like just a number, to feel like just a cog. That's an abnormal human experience that results in an abnormal human reaction. And a lot of people will say to me, Zach, well, I have a narcissistic employee or a narcissistic boss, or we try to, adopt these clinical labels to this. Less than 1.5% of the population is a clinical narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
So the person who's acting out that you think is a difficult, toxic person is not a difficult, toxic person. They're a person behaving in toxic or difficult ways that as a result of some unmet need.
Mm-hmm.
So I think reframing these labels is important and seeking understanding of the many possible unmet needs or met needs that are resulting in the behavior is really a skill for great leaders.
Yeah. It's tough though because when we go back to, why isn't there more examples of this being done well? Um, because that then forces accountability,
Yeah,
right?
and it's hard.
So it's hard and it's also, it's sometimes often maybe easier to just go with the categories and the labels and make
Hmm.
it their fault, not your fault, right? Um, but really unfortunate,
Yeah.
to see it play out.
And then we often then and then what we do, there's a study that was published in Harvard Business Review, and the researchers wanted to, they looked at like thousands, I think it was over like 30,000 incidences of performance feedback. And they found that about 39% of all feedback that's meant to improve performance actually reduces performance.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key reasons why is that the people receiving the performance didn't feel understood by the person giving the feedback. So
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to our first conversation. It's hard for your best worded critique or feedback to matter to someone who doesn't believe that they matter to you, right?
Right.
So it wasn't a problem with the person. It was the problem with the relationship between the person giving the critique, trying to improve the performance, and the person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's really important to understand is a lot of times we try to critique before we care. We try to
Mm-hmm.
improve someone's performance before we understand, or we outsource it, send them to HR, outsource their development, and we slap them on a performance improvement plan
Mm-hmm.
without seeking understanding, or we threaten them, which if you've e- if you have you ever improved your performance sustainably under threat?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, hey, we're going to terminate you if you don't get things together. Then I'm going to be self-protective, defensive in survival mode. I'm going to be less creative, less innovative, less motivated. I'm going to have a lower sense of self-worth, which are exactly the things that I need to improve my performance.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people say to me, Zach, how do I show people that they matter if I need them to improve their performance? You show people that they matter so you have the relational groundwork needed to help them improve their performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, we only have a couple more minutes. I have three more questions I want to try and get to, so we can go relatively fast. You have a chapter in the book titled "You Matter." So, what what is the theme of that? What do listeners need to remember about, how as individuals they matter in the context of creating this culture of significance?
This is really hard for people to hear. I put that at the end of the book because the evidence is very clear that it's very hard to feel that you matter if you're not in supportive relationships in which others show you how you matter.
Mm-hmm.
We can come to believe that we matter on our own. It takes others to show us how. Mattering is one of the most powerful psychological constructs that's almost entirely dependent on others,
Mm-hmm.
which is very uncomfortable. But there are some things that we can do to create like a base from which we can launch out into the world and do these things for other people. I mean, one is to really think about what is your so that every day. What I mean by that is that one of our first studies was with a group of university janitors. We asked them all, what's the most meaningful part of your job? This one woman said it's cleaning the bathrooms in these university dormitories where all these students stay on Monday mornings after the weekend, which sounds absolutely disgusting. And I asked her, I said, why? Why is that your moment? She goes, well, it's the part of my job I hate the most. So I can't forget it. I have to deal with it. But every time I go into that bathroom, I say to myself, I'm cleaning this bathroom so that these kids don't get sick. And what we find is that people who experience a high level of mattering, they tend to have a so that mentality.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be able to link whatever it is that they're doing with its human impact. So have that so that mentality. Think about the inevitable impact you're making. But the second thing is do show other people how they matter in everyday interactions, and you'll see the evidence of your significance. For example, if you're going to the grocery store, and I don't know why, maybe I need to go grocery shopping. I don't know why I'm using the exact grocery store examples today. But if you're going to the grocery store and you see the clerk there and you see their name there on their name tag, ask them, say their name and then just say, hey, I just want to thank you for being here. I know work and life can be really hard, but it really makes a difference that you're here. Ask them some questions about their life. And then, regardless of the kind of day you had, notice how you feel in the 5 minutes after that
Mm-hmm.
interaction. And it's this boomerang effect of mattering. The more we show people their significance, the more we actually see how much agency we have in our interactions to change the day of someone else, to
Mm-hmm.
change the trajectory of someone else. The more we are reaffirmed with our agency. And it goes back to the more we feel valued, the more we add value, the more we add value, the more we feel valued. And so that's the upward spiral you can take for yourself to see how you matter.
Yeah. I, at some point, I don't know, years ago, really, I started a practice of anytime I have a nice thought in my head about someone when I'm out and about, grocery store, airplane, airport, wherever, I just tell them, I like your glasses.
Yeah.
Oh, I love your bag. Oh, you have a really nice smile, whatever it is, because to your point, like you never know when that teeny tiny bit of effort is just going to have a huge impact on someone else. And if you're thinking it, why not expend this little bit of energy to just say it out loud, right?
I'll
The
say
worst they're
this.
going to do is roll their eyes at you or be dismissive, but
I will
what
say
difference
this
does it
though,
make?
like not only that, but I think it's a public health concern because um, one of the groups that I got to work with is I got to go clean airplanes with the group that comes on the airplanes and cleans them.
Hmm.
And I went down and I was observing them. It was as I was finishing the book, and I put on the vest. And right when I put on that yellow vest to go on the plane, I was utterly invisible.
Hmm.
I never nobody ever made eye contact with me, right? There are so many people in workplaces of all types that
Hmm.
experience that every single day. So by you, if you're in the bathroom at the airport and you see a custodian and you say, "Hey," I always say, "Hey, thanks. It looks great in here. I appreciate this. I know this is tough work." They like are startled. That may be the only time that someone thanks them in months.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so easy to do and it can make such a big difference.
But then imagine the difference their supervisor can make.
Exactly.
Imagine the difference of a line worker in a manufacturing plant, the difference their supervisor can make.
Hmm.
Imagine the difference of someone who comes in on a team, accounting team or whatever, the and does this behind the scenes work. Imagine the difference that the supervisor can make. And I think this is the point of the podcast, right? Is that
Hmm.
leaders matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I want to go back to you use the team analogy in the beginning. And when we were talking about belonging, inclusion, and mattering, right? And you were talking
Hmm.
about being part of a team, understanding your place on the team, and feeling that you are seeing and feeling how you are a part of the team's outcome, right? So immediately I thought of this and I saved it for the end, which is what I'm hoping you can just kind of comment on in summary is why making people feel they matter could never be solved by a participation trophy, right? And
Mm.
what I mean by that is this idea of this none of this work can be faked, right? It
Yeah,
has to
right,
be
right.
genuine and it
Yep.
has to be done with authenticity.
Hmm.
So how does that factor in here?
Yeah, I like the participation trophy because it's a good symbol metaphor for an award, a
Hmm.
certificate, a raise, a promotion. These are all symbols. They're all inanimate objects. They can't value somebody.
Hmm.
A trophy cannot value somebody. It cannot do the act of valuing a person. An award cannot value somebody. A perk cannot value somebody. They can be symbols of value,
Hmm.
but only people can value people. We only truly feel valued when other people value us.
Hmm.
And that's why you cannot program, perk your way out of an employee disengagement crisis, for example. You can
Right.
only re-engineer how you and everybody in the organization shows up in daily interactions.
Hmm. And
There
I
is
think,
no trophy can make up for the daily experience of feeling unseen, unheard, and unvalued.
yeah. And that's the distinction, right? You know, you had some statistics about the amount of money that's being invested in some of these programs, right? That are not having the impact that companies want them to have. It's not that the programs, the procedures, you know, the awards themselves are bad. It's that it can never replace this piece, right? It's absolutely
Yes.
crucial. And, you know, as we talked about at the beginning, even more so.
The magic happens. The symbols are not bad. In fact,
Mhm.
I work with one of the biggest recognition platforms out there. And the dialogue that I have is that the symbols are not bad. The magic happens when the symbol matches up with the daily experience.
Yeah. Yeah. They're tools, right?
And
Any of
that's
that
what
is
that's what's
tools
missing though, I
in
think.
a toolkit. I agree.
I think what's
Yeah.
missing is we've invested a lot on these symbols of value without ensuring the daily experience of feeling valued.
Like the actual humanity of it.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
takes, we've talked about, it's simple but skillful.
Mm-hmm.
Takes intention, attention, and skill.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing I wanted to say, Zach, for everyone is I have conversations with quite a few leaders that, really I think will love this content and your message and really are working hard to embody it. And I love having the opportunity to talk to those people. Sometimes they are working in organizations that have not yet embraced this thinking. And so you made a point earlier about, you don't need to have your organization's approval or the board's approval to do this work. And, while sometimes I think for these individuals, they may reach a point where, they ascertain that the cultures of the organization just don't align with the cultures or the
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
beliefs that they hold. um, in the meantime, or in certain situations, just like we talked about with our examples of interacting with humans out and about, right? You can have a tremendous impact on people's lives by embracing this work of your free will,
Yeah.
while the company catches up to what needs to be done. So I thought that was a really good point that you
Yeah.
made that I just wanted to reinforce.
I think a lot of people say also, and I will say this, a lot of people say to me, what if my leader doesn't do this for me?
Mm-hmm.
I always ask them, do you do it for them?
Mm-hmm.
This work is non-directional. It's a way of
Yeah.
being. It's a way of being. It's a way of showing up. Your leader is a person.
Yeah.
Uh, and
I love that point.
and I think
Model
it's a
it, right?
yeah, I think there's this I don't mean to get too like research based, but there's this principle in psychology. It's called the complementarity principle in relationships. It means that if someone never checks in on you, and you're more likely to not check in on them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this spiral of like a bad relationship goes on. But what researchers find is it takes someone to go first.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I start checking in on you, start asking how you're doing, start giving you thanks, very quickly you'll notice, probably in about 2 weeks' time, that person will start doing that for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's this norm of reciprocity that's sort of sustained human beings forever. But someone has to go first. And I
Yeah.
know that's hard and it takes a lot of courage to do that. But I mean, I think that's what we need. So are you doing this upward? The other thing I would say is yes, one of the things that this could help name for you is that if you're not feeling that you matter, you may be withdrawing
Mm-hmm.
or acting out in desperation and being able to say to yourself, yeah, that's what's happening here. I'm withdrawing. I'm not actually inputting effort into other people because I don't feel like other people input effort into me. But what you're doing is you're actually becoming the leader that you say you don't want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can always control your interactions. If you can leave that organization, then leave,
Mm-hmm.
right? But most people cannot just do that, especially
Sure.
right now. So make the decision to not give away the last source of power you have, which is interactional power.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay, I love it. Zach, where can people learn more about you, your work, the book? Where should they find you?
Yeah, you can go to zachmercurio.com.
Okay.
There's a Mattering page there, like on under Learn, and there's all these free resources, free assessments. You don't need like any email address or anything. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. I have a fairly good group on there of real people. Like if you look at their job titles, I think they're real.
Yeah.
They have really interesting, all leaders really who
I
are
can see
engaged in
how
this
you would
work.
attract real people. I mean, this is real stuff that really
Yeah.
matters to real people that
Yeah, and
care and
there's
want
some people who
to
disagree, right?
learn.
Like
Yeah,
there's a lot of people out there who say to me, you can, it's up to you to determine show up like you matter. I can't wait for other people to share that. But you can believe that you matter. It takes other people to show us how. But
sure.
so we have those conversations there, which is
Yeah,
good.
I love it. All right. So everyone, check out Zach's website and go give him a follow on LinkedIn to see future content. Check out the book and think about how you can build a culture of significance in your own organizations. Zach, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
It was a
Sarah.
pleasure. You can find more by visiting the home of Unscripted at futureoffieldservice.com. While you're there, be sure to subscribe for the Insider, our monthly email newsletter with exclusive content for subscribers only. The podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.